Hi, my name is Dawn. Welcome to my kitchen. Today we're making an olive oil cake. Does that sound weird to you? It did the first time I saw it, but all the reviews were great, so I thought I'm going to give this a try, and boy am I glad I did. This cake is a winner. We love to have it as a snacking cake, as a fancy cake, and it looks like not a fancy cake, but it tastes like a fancy cake. This recipe comes to us from epicurious.com. I think Claire's saffet recipe, it's a winner, as I've said. Okay, let's get going. First, let's pull out all our ingredients. It's an olive oil cake, so we will need our olive oil. We'll need granulated sugar, and I pulled out my scale because I'm going to be weighing. We'll be using cake flour, and you definitely want to use cake flour for this. Please, do whatever you want, but substituting all-purpose flour is not going to produce the same result. Fine cornmeal or almond flour, but I've got cornmeal today. Baking soda, baking powder, kosher salt. The recipe calls for 3 tablespoons of liqueur like amaretto or Grand Marnier. I don't have any liqueur, so I have pulled out some sherry. If you don't use alcohol, you can substitute in, say, maple syrup or just some water. You need a liquid in there to make the ratios right. Yeah, I'm just using sherry. We're going to need the zest and juice from a lemon, vanilla extract. We'll need 3 eggs, and that's all our ingredients. And it's worth it to have the right ingredients for this cake because it really makes it super special. Okay, let's pull out our tools. As you can see, I pulled out the measuring equipment as I picked up the ingredients. That's to make sure that I know that I've got the right quantity, I've got enough before I get going and have disaster, which is so sad. This is made in a 9-inch springform pan, and we're going to be lining it with parchment paper. You might already have pre-made rounds. I do not, so I'm going to be making one. You'll see I've already pulled out my stand mixer. You can make it with a hand mixer. By hand, you're going to be using a lot of energy, and you can do that, but I'll be using my stand mixer, and for that, I pulled out the whisk attachment, which it specifically suggests. We'll need a bowl for mixing our dry ingredients, and I will, as usual, use my one so I can pour it because this doesn't lift up. And I've grabbed my whisk to whisk the dry ingredients. We'll need a little bowl for putting some of our liquid ingredients, and we'll need our spatula at some point to be stirring and scraping down in our mixer. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Okay, first step is I need to make a round for my pan. How I like to do this is I pull out my cutting board and I just put it on here. You can trace it and then cut out, but I just use this really sharp paring knife and I will just go all the way around. So it gives me a bit of a head start. And you just, as you can see, I'm just putting my hand firmly in the middle so it doesn't slip and slide. And then I'm just cutting all the way around. In some cases, I may have cut enough to break it. I don't. So I've just grabbed my scissors and I'm just going to cut around that mark that I've made. This does not have to be perfect. And the scissors will go quite nicely around this cut mark because it's made an indentation. There we go. That's not hard at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our olive oil, and we're just going to pour a little bit in our pan and use our fingers to spread it around. It's kind of messy, but you got to do what you got to do. So just get it so it's all around, and then take your parchment piece and pop it in there, and then just put, should not have closed that. And then just pour a tiny bit. Your hands might even have enough on them to cover it, but in case not, just you want to make sure it's covered. And if any bubbles start to pop up, you just smooth them out with your hand. Okay, gotta wash. I swear that's the worst part of making this cake, but don't let it stop you. It's worth it. Okay, now we're just going to grab a little bit of our sugar and put it in here and coat it well. This gives a super great crust to our cake, and so don't skimp, make sure it's well coated. And I just do it like this to get it all the way up the sides, try not to spill, use my hand to catch it, and honestly I usually do it over the sink. So let's just do that. I like to go around, make sure it's well coated, and then give it a couple of good bangs to get any excess off, because you do not need the excess. Okay, we can put that aside until we're ready to bake. Okay, hardest part done. So it really isn't hard at all, it just feels hard. So anyways, let's get making our cake. So first thing that we're going to do is we are going to put our dry ingredients together. We need 226 grams of our cake flour. We're going to need 1/3 of a cup of our cornmeal or almond flour. Now you're going, why aren't you weighing this? Well, I couldn't really find a good gram weighting, so I'm just going to measure it out because I just don't want to have too much or too little. And now we'll add our salt. I need 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And I just realized I forgot to turn on my oven, but no problem. These things happen in our baking all the time, and we just don't sweat it. So we want to turn our oven on to 400 degrees, and we want the rack in the middle. Okay, there we go, back on track. And we need 1/2 teaspoon of our baking soda. And just using our whisk, we will whisk this up. And this takes a bit of whisking because the cake flour is a little denser than our all-purpose flour, and you've got your cornmeal, and you want it well mixed. There, all done. And now grab our small bowl, and we're going to add our liquid ingredients. We want our 3 tablespoons of our liqueur, or in my case today, sherry. We're going to want 2 teaspoons of our vanilla. And then we want our lemon. So we want to zest it before we juice it. It calls for 1 tablespoon. I'm just going to do a whole bunch of zesting here. That definitely looks like a tablespoon, so I'm good to go. And now we're going to juice our lemon. Now it calls for 3 tablespoons. I'm not going to measure. I know that's bad for baking, but I'm just going to juice the lemon and have a visual look at how much comes out. But I think I'll probably get enough from the whole lemon. Okay, and now we will just give this a little stir. And we'll put this aside. Okay, grab your mixing bowl. I just did something wrong. The zest was supposed to go in here. I don't really think it's going to make that much of a difference because I think I do this all the time. I'm reading the recipe as I'm going along, just double checking I'm doing it right for you, realizing that I don't do it that way. So if you do what I did, you're A-okay, so don't worry about that. But if you follow the recipe, you'll be putting the lemon zest in your mixing bowl. So to our mixing bowl, we are going to put 3 eggs. And I'm putting a pack in with 1 left. That's going to confuse us, but I do have another dozen. If you don't know, eggs keep a long time in the fridge, so it's always worth it if you have the space and the ability to always have an extra dozen in the fridge, which is what we do. For our granulated sugar, we're going to add 225 grams of granulated sugar. So we are now going to beat this for 3 minutes. If you're using an electric mixer, it'll be 5 minutes, and with the stand mixer, 3 minutes. And what we're going to be looking for is that it comes off in sort of ribbons. That's when you'll know it's been right. And I'll show you when we're done after our 3 minutes and it's at the correct consistency. Okay, when you're done, lower your beaters and look at how pale it is. It's very pale. I'm trying to get out of the shadows of our lights, but it's very pale. So that's what we're looking for. And then you want to lift your beaters up and see if it falls in a ribbon. And see how that falls in a ribbon? That's what you're looking for. Okay, we're super good to go to our next step. Okay, now what you want to do is measure out your 1 1/4 cup of your olive oil. And we're going to use our olive oil later for drizzling on the cooked cake, so that's why I have the tablespoon out, and I'm going to keep this, I'll just put it to the side for now. Still on high, we're going to add the olive oil in a stream and until it's really incorporated, and it's going to make a very thick batter. And take a minute just to scrape down the batter off the sides. Some of the olive oil will have splashed up, but surprisingly it doesn't seem to splash out of the bowl when I do it, which is always my fear, and it doesn't happen. You just want to make sure that the olive oil is fully incorporated, and mine is. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to add our dry ingredients and our wet ingredients alternating. So we start with the dry, we'll do a third dry, half of the wet, another third dry, the rest of the wet, the rest of the dry. And you just want to make sure it's incorporated, and you're going to do it on a slower speed. And be careful with the dry on the first go because it always seems to poof up. And as always, with these dry ingredients, do one blast at the end just to make sure it's fully incorporated. And on your last addition of the dry ingredients, scrape down your bowl just before you do that final blast, just to make sure all the dry ingredients are incorporated. Okay, so now we'll take off our bowl. And using your spatula, just make sure you go all the way around. Make sure there's no flour or anything left in the bottom, but we're all good to go. So grab your pan and pour in your batter. Now it says to smooth the top, but I've always found that it's liquidy enough, it kind of self-smooth. Now grab your sugar, and you need 2 tablespoons of sugar over the top. Approximately, it doesn't have to be actual. Or it doesn't have to be that accurate. This is just going to reinforce the sugar that we put on the sides and the bottom of the pan, so it's got that sugary crust everywhere. So now we're going to go put this in our oven. We're going to reduce the oven to 350 degrees, and we are going to bake it for 40 to 50 minutes. We'll check in at 40 minutes and see how it's going. Okay, it's been our 40 minutes, so let's have a look. Whoa! Look at how groovy that looks. Yep. So you just want to make sure that your skewer comes out clean, and it did. So we are ready to go. Okay, we're going to put it on a rack and let it cool in the pan for 15 minutes. Okay, our 15 minutes is up, and now what we're going to do is we're going to add more olive oil. So we're going to poke it. I just grabbed the skewer I was testing it with. You can use a fork or a toothpick, just something to poke holes all over. And now you're going to want to drizzle 2 tablespoons of your olive oil all over the cake. Now take a few seconds and make sure that it gets fully absorbed. And then grab a knife, I've got my palette knife, and just run it around the edge of your pan. And then we're going to open it up. And now we're going to put it on our rack to cool completely. And I'm just gonna slip that knife under there and get it off the base and onto our pan. And then just slip your knife under and grab that parchment paper too. Should come off pretty easily, as you can see. Now, we want to cool it completely. And honestly, what you want to do is you want to wrap it and eat it the next day. So yeah, I didn't tell you this, but this is kind of a best make ahead. So it's great. When you have time, you can make it. This will keep at room temperature for 4 or 5 days a week. It freezes excellent. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna let it cool completely, then I'll wrap it in plastic overnight, and then we are going to have our taste testing tomorrow. Hi, we're back today on the next day. So our cake has been wrapped in plastic, and now we've waited 24 hours. Of course, if you wanted to eat it right away, you could, but honestly, this cake just gets better and better every single day. So now it's time to give it a taste. Now it's time to cut into it. And you don't need to have anything with this cake. Of course you could, but it is fantastic on its own. Ooh, look at that crumb. And you know what's super fun about this cake is it looks plain, but it tastes so fantastic. So it's a surprise to people who think you've just served them a basic cake, and then they taste it and they're taken to this fun, yummy place. So let's give it a try. Okay, let's try it. It's so moist. It doesn't taste really like olive oil. It just tastes, I don't know, something. And the cornmeal makes it a little crunchy bit. Such a winner, such a great cake. I hope you give this recipe a try, and until next time, keep cooking.